Lewis Hamilton returns to Mercedes after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Do you want to know the real reason behind his dismissal from Ferrari? Stay until the end. This video is for you. Subscribe to stay informed about the latest Formula One news. Lewis Hamilton's decision reverberated through the entire Formula One community with the force of an earthquake, leaving fans, journalists, rival teams, and even his own teammates stunned into silence. Nobody had anticipated such a dramatic twist in the career of a man who had built his legacy on rewriting the record books, defying expectations, and pushing the boundaries of what a driver could achieve. The storm erupted in the aftermath of the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, a race that symbolized the breaking point of Hamilton's patience, exposing the cracks in a partnership that had once been presented to the world as a glorious marriage between the most successful driver of the modern era and the most iconic team in motorsport history. The glossy image that Ferrari had painted with grand announcements and bold marketing slogans quickly dissolved into a harsh reality that Hamilton could neither tolerate nor ignore. The Ferrari he had pinned his hopes on was not the machine of his dreams, but a car that seemed almost to resist him at every corner. The chassis felt cumbersome, its agility lost in tight turns, its response sluggish when he tried to throw it into high-speed sections where confidence and balance were essential. On the straights, it lacked the stability and consistency that allowed him to unleash his natural speed, often leaving him frustrated as rival cars sailed past with greater efficiency. Tire management, a critical skill in modern Formula One, was unpredictable, with the Ferrari swinging between moments of promise and laps of total degradation that shattered race strategies. The delicate harmony between driver and machine, something Hamilton had mastered so many times before with precision and grace, simply did not exist. Instead of feeling like an extension of his own instincts, the Ferrari felt like an endless negotiation, a compromise he had never signed up for. The car's shortcomings were only part of the growing fracture. More damaging than the mechanical weaknesses was the philosophical rift between Hamilton and Ferrari's leadership. Frédéric Vasseur, the team principal who had convinced Hamilton to take this daring leap, stood firm on his long-term vision for the Scuderia. He preached patience, incremental steps, and a rebuilding process that might take years before yielding results. But Hamilton, who had fought his entire career with an unrelenting urgency to win and an obsession with immediate progress, found this approach intolerable. He had joined Ferrari to fight at the front, not to endure yet another rebuilding phase while his career clock ticked mercilessly forward. For him, every lap, every qualifying session, every race mattered, and every wasted opportunity felt like a betrayal of his purpose. That Sunday evening in Baku, with the weight of disappointment pressing heavily on his shoulders, Hamilton walked into the Ferrari motorhome, where the tension had been simmering behind closed doors for weeks. Away from the cameras but within earshot of team members and staff who pretended to busy themselves elsewhere, Hamilton finally unleashed the storm he had kept bottled up. His voice, calm at first, carried an edge of controlled anger as he questioned the direction of the team, the absence of significant upgrades, and above all, the lofty promises that had been made to him during contract negotiations. Vasseur, usually diplomatic, snapped back with irritation. His words carried the frustration of a man tired of being second-guessed by his superstar driver, reminding Hamilton in no uncertain terms that Ferrari was not Mercedes, that the culture of Maranello moved differently, that glory would not be built overnight. The exchange escalated with each passing sentence. Hamilton's tone hardened as he accused Ferrari of failing to equip him with the weapons necessary to wage battle at the front. Vasseur's voice rose in return, cutting through the air like a blade, accusing Hamilton of expecting miracles, of failing to recognize the enormity of the task of reviving Ferrari's dominance. The dialogue turned from disagreement into confrontation, the motorhome thick with hostility. Staff who overheard the raised voices exchanged uneasy glances, fully aware that something irreversible was happening within those walls. For Hamilton, the argument was not merely about car performance or engineering timelines. It was about identity, trust, and belonging. He had gambled on Ferrari, believing that he could be the driver who restored the prancing horse to its former glory, the man who would deliver the championship drought-breaking triumph that millions of tifosi longed for. But now, standing face-to-face with Vasseur, hearing words that clashed violently with his own philosophy, he realized with painful clarity that the gamble had failed. Leaving that room, his jaw set in steely determination and his eyes burning with the unmistakable fire of disillusionment, Hamilton understood what he had been resisting since the early races of the season. The thought had whispered in the back of his mind, subtle at first, then louder with each disappointment: he did not belong here. Ferrari was not his home, not the place where his final chapters should be written. He had taken a leap of faith, but the landing was uneven, the ground unstable. As he walked out into the night, surrounded by the murmurs of a paddock that could sense the seismic shift, Hamilton already knew the course he would chart next. His path with Ferrari had reached its breaking point, and his decision, when revealed, would shake the sport to its very core. That night in Baku, behind the closed doors of his hotel suite, Hamilton found himself alone with nothing but the glow of the city lights filtering in through the window. The sound of the bustling streets below seemed distant, muted by the weight pressing down on his chest. His phone lay untouched on the small table beside him, the screen dark, reflecting only his own expression, tired, conflicted, yet determined. For a long while, he just stared at it, wrestling with the thoughts that had consumed him for weeks, thoughts that had been building ever since he first stepped into the scarlet world of Ferrari. Eventually, unable to fight the pull any longer, he reached for the phone, his fingers hesitating as though the decision carried the force of destiny. He unlocked it slowly, scrolling through the familiar list of names, each one carrying a piece of his past, his victories, his battles, his life on and off the track. And then he found it, the name that for years had been at the center of his greatest triumphs, Toto Wolff. His thumb hovered over the call button, and in that instant he felt his pulse quicken. Memories flooded in uninvited, the championship celebrations, the moments of tension in meetings, the strategies whispered over the radio, the unspoken bond that had carried them through a decade of dominance. It wasn't just about racing, it was about trust, about loyalty, about knowing there was someone on the other side who believed in him unconditionally. With a breath so deep it nearly shuddered, Hamilton pressed the button. The dial tone rang once, twice, 3 times, each sound echoing louder than the last in the silence of the suite, until finally the line clicked alive. "Lewis," came the voice, calm, steady, unmistakably Toto's. There was surprise in it, but also something else, curiosity, perhaps a hint of anticipation. "I didn't expect your call at this hour." For a second, Hamilton said nothing, his throat tightening. Then he forced himself to speak, his words carrying the weight of frustration, disappointment, and a desire to break free. "Toto," he began, his voice low, deliberate, almost weary. "I can't do this anymore. I've tried, really I have. Ferrari, it isn't working for me. I went in believing in a vision, believing in the promises they made, believing in something new, something different. But the reality is so far from what I imagined. The car doesn't give me what I need, the structure feels wrong, the philosophy clashes with everything I've known about how to fight at the highest level. I thought I could adapt, but after what happened in Azerbaijan, I know in my heart this isn't my place. It never truly was." The silence that followed stretched long, heavy, almost unbearable. Hamilton could hear Toto breathing on the other end, considering, absorbing, weighing the words that had just been spoken. And then finally, Toto's voice broke through, softer now but edged with gravity. "Are you saying what I think you're saying?" Hamilton closed his eyes, the decision already made long before this call, but speaking it out loud felt like crossing an invisible threshold. "Yes," he said firmly, without hesitation this time. "I want to come back. I want to return to Mercedes. This isn't about pride, and it isn't about money or contracts or any of the politics that surround this sport. It's about racing. It's about winning. It's about being in an environment where I can give everything I have and know the team around me is pushing with the same fire. Toto, I don't want my career to drift into disappointment, into frustration, into regrets that I can't erase. I don't want to fade out quietly. I want it to end the way it began, with Mercedes, with the people I trust, chasing victories, fighting for championships, doing what I was born to do." His words lingered in the air, unspoken emotions riding on each syllable. In that moment, Hamilton wasn't just a driver searching for a better car, he was a man confronting the very essence of his legacy, reaching out to the one person who could help him reclaim it. The silence on the line wasn't empty, it was loaded, filled with history, respect, and the spark of something that might once again change the course of Formula One. For a long, charged moment, nothing but silence filled the line, not the ordinary silence of an empty call but the weighty, almost electric kind of pause that seems to appear only when fate itself is shifting, when something monumental is about to happen, and both sides know the world will not look the same once the words are spoken. Then, breaking through that fragile stillness, Toto's voice emerged, not sharp or commanding as it so often was in meetings or strategy discussions, but softened in a way that betrayed the storm of emotions behind it. There was surprise, yes, but also relief, hope, and a deep excitement that he could not hide, as if an old flame that had never truly gone out was suddenly roaring back to life. "Lewis," he began, his tone carrying a warmth that only a handful of people had ever heard from him, "I told you years ago, and I meant it every single time, our door is never closed to you. You're not just a driver for us, you're family, you're part of our story, part of our bloodline. Circumstances pulled us apart before, and the timing wasn't right, but none of that erases what we built. If you are standing there today truly ready to come back, if your heart is telling you that silver is still where you belong, then we will make this happen. Not tomorrow, not in theory, but now. We want you back, Lewis." The words seemed to loosen something inside Hamilton, a knot of tension that had been choking him for weeks. The endless questions, the media noise, the quiet moments of doubt, all of it seemed to crumble away as his chest finally felt light again. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile tugging at his lips, the first genuine smile he had allowed himself in what felt like forever. His reply came steady, without hesitation, carrying the same conviction that had fueled him through years of championships. "Then let's do it," he said, each syllable resonating with certainty. "I'll sort everything out with the lawyers, I'll tie up every loose end with Ferrari, but I'm done waiting, Toto. I'm ready now. I want to put on that silver suit again, I want to feel the roar of a Mercedes beneath me, I want to fight for victories with the team that made me who I am." On the other end, Toto let out a low chuckle, but beneath the brief laugh was a weight of emotion he could not disguise. His tone shifted again, this time carrying that unyielding determination that had made him one of the most formidable leaders in Formula One. "Lewis," he said firmly, "this is bigger than any contract dispute, bigger than politics, bigger than the noise that surrounds us. You know what this means, to me, to every single mechanic in the garage, to the engineers who stayed late night after night, to the fans who never stopped chanting your name. You and I, we didn't just win races, we built something extraordinary, something that people will talk about for decades. And maybe, just maybe, it was never meant to end the way it did. Perhaps destiny was always leading us back to this moment. So let me say it clearly, with no conditions, no hesitation, welcome home, Lewis." Hamilton closed his eyes for a second, letting those words wash over him. It wasn't just a return, it wasn't just another chapter, it was a rebirth. For the first time in months, he felt like he was exactly where he belonged. The days that followed unfolded in a storm of chaos, negotiations, anger, and quiet determination. Every hour was consumed by Hamilton's representatives moving relentlessly between tense phone calls, secret meetings in discreet hotel suites, and back-and-forth exchanges with lawyers and advisors who were dissecting every line of his Ferrari contract in search of weaknesses. What appeared from the outside as a sudden decision had in reality become an exhausting chess match, with Ferrari's leadership digging in their heels and refusing to let go of their star signing without a brutal fight. John Elkann and Benedetto Vigna, usually calm in public, were described by insiders as seething with rage, and Fred Vasseur, who had bet heavily on Hamilton to transform Ferrari's fortunes, was furious beyond measure. Italian journalists sharpened their pens and unleashed wave after wave of biting columns and front-page attacks, branding Hamilton a deserter, a traitor, and a man unwilling to face the pressure of Maranello. Yet amid all the noise, Hamilton carried himself with a serenity that almost seemed to provoke his critics even further. He had no doubts, no second-guessing. For the first time in months, the fog that had clouded his mind was gone, and every cell of his body told him that his destiny was not in red, but in silver once more. At Mercedes, the atmosphere was entirely different. While the public still questioned whether the once dominant team had truly found its way back after years of turbulence, inside Brackley there was a spark of electricity not felt since the glory days. The possibility of Hamilton's return was spoken of in hushed tones, whispered in corridors, and exchanged in knowing glances among senior engineers. The prospect was not just about numbers on a contract or PR headlines, it was about leadership, about restoring the heartbeat of the team. Almost immediately, the most trusted technical staff began arranging off-the-record sessions with Hamilton. They laid out diagrams, performance sheets, and upgrade roadmaps, eager to hear his insights, knowing his ability to sense a car's potential was unmatched. His feedback was razor-sharp, his suggestions practical yet visionary, and in those secret conversations, the first outlines of a new Mercedes revival began to take shape. When the news finally broke, the reaction around the world was volcanic. Fans scrolled through their phones in disbelief, some cheering wildly, others shaking their heads in dismay, and many unable to process how quickly the narrative had flipped. Social media platforms collapsed into a frenzy of hashtags and arguments. Comment sections turned into battlegrounds. On one side, those who accused Hamilton of running away from the challenge at Ferrari, abandoning the dream of delivering the Italians their first championship in over a decade. On the other, those who hailed him for his honesty, his humility in admitting a misstep, and his bravery in choosing passion over pride. Television pundits filled hour-long segments dissecting every angle. Former champions chimed in with anecdotes, while team principals past and present speculated about the inner workings of the deal. The sheer shock of the timing, right after the Azerbaijan Grand Prix, only intensified the drama, with conspiracy theories swirling that the race itself, with its frustrations and technical setbacks, had been the final breaking point for Hamilton. For him, though, all the noise faded the moment he walked through the sliding glass doors of the Mercedes headquarters in Brackley. Photographers captured the moment, flashes illuminating his arrival, but what touched him most were not the cameras, it was the faces. The smiles of engineers who had stood beside him through 7 world titles, the mechanics who had sweated with him through grueling nights, the quiet nods of longtime staff who understood that this was not just business but family. He felt the warmth instantly, a sensation of belonging that no red suit, no Italian anthem, and no promises of glory in Maranello had ever given him. When Toto Wolff appeared, the two men embraced without hesitation, and for a brief moment the entire building seemed to exhale. Nothing needed to be said aloud. Both understood the magnitude of this reunion, the depth of the trust, and the sense of unfinished business. Later that day, behind closed doors, Hamilton stood before the core of the team. The air was heavy with expectation, every eye locked on him, every ear waiting. He spoke not as a superstar addressing employees, but as a leader returning to his people. His voice carried raw honesty, stripped of the carefully measured diplomacy he had once used at Ferrari. He admitted openly that his venture into Maranello had been a miscalculation, a dream that had not matched reality. But he emphasized that he was not defeated, far from it. His hunger had only grown sharper, his fire brighter. He vowed to push harder than ever, to wring every ounce of performance from the car, to lead the development with relentless precision, and to inspire the garage with the same energy that had once made them invincible. As he spoke, the room shifted, the skepticism dissolved, the doubts evaporated. What remained was belief, not just in Hamilton's talent, but in the idea that Mercedes, with him at the wheel, could rise again. And in that moment, it became clear that Hamilton had not merely returned as a driver. He had come back as a force, mentally sharper, emotionally stronger, and more determined than at any point in his storied career. As the first signs of Hamilton's return to Mercedes began to unfold, the atmosphere across the paddock carried a charge that felt almost impossible to contain. Every mechanic, engineer, journalist, and rival could sense that something monumental was about to take place. It wasn't simply another driver stepping into a car, it was the reappearance of a legend reclaiming the machinery with which he had built an empire. Eyes followed his every movement, whether it was the way he adjusted his gloves, the calm precision in his stride toward the garage, or the faint smile he carried as though he knew the storm he was about to unleash. Competitors exchanged glances that mixed unease with admiration, because they understood that Hamilton, back in silver, was not just a competitor but a force capable of bending the outcome of an entire season. For those who had watched him dominate for years, the return felt like destiny had finally circled back to its rightful place. The black helmet glinting under the lights, the unmistakable Mercedes star hovering proudly above the garage door, the sound of fans chanting his name as though their voices alone could push him back onto the top step of the podium. All of it created a scene that felt more like the opening act of a legend than the beginning of another race weekend. Supporters who had lived through his rise with Mercedes, through the battles, the heartbreaks, and the triumphs, knew this moment carried more weight than statistics or trophies could measure. It was history, alive and unfolding right before their eyes. Hamilton's decision to return to the team that had shaped his greatest achievements was far more than a contractual change or a calculated career move. It was a declaration, a bold message to the sport, to his rivals, and even to himself. He was reminding the world that mistakes and detours did not define a career, but the courage to acknowledge them and the strength to correct them did. The move was layered with symbolism, a nod to loyalty in a sport where allegiances often shift like desert sands, an embrace of unfinished chapters that still called out to him, and a recognition that sometimes the heart knows better than the head where home truly lies. In the hyper-political landscape of Formula One, where contracts, sponsors, and shifting alliances dominate headlines, Hamilton's return cut through the noise like a clarion call. It was not about power plays or corporate maneuvers, but about legacy, honor, and the pursuit of something greater than personal glory. It was about a man who had nothing left to prove on paper, but everything left to chase in spirit. For rivals, It was a warning that the battle for championships had just acquired a far more dangerous dimension. For fans, it was the restoration of a bond that felt eternal, one that tied Hamilton's destiny to the Silver Arrows in a way that no other team could replicate. More than anything, it reignited the fire within him. The spark that had seemed to flicker in recent seasons now burned brighter than ever. There was a renewed sharpness in his eyes, a focus that spoke of unfinished conquests and unclaimed victories waiting just beyond the horizon. With every engine roar, every shakedown lap, every subtle adjustment to the setup, it became clear that this was not a return for nostalgia's sake, but the beginning of one of the most electrifying chapters in the history of the sport. Formula One thrives on drama, rivalries, and redemption arcs, and Hamilton's comeback to Mercedes promised all of that in abundance. It was the rebirth of a saga that would echo through the paddock, through grandstands packed with roaring supporters, and through the pages of racing history for years to come.